It's 12 o'clock on July 3rd, 2023. I'd like to call the Borough meeting for the Petersburg Borough to order. With that, would the clerk please call the roll?
David,
Here.
Mark,
Excused.
Bob,
Here.
Jeff,
Here.
Scott,
Here.
Thomas, Donna.
With that, for the folks that are listening, we have 6 people on the dais with 1 person excused. And with that, we'll have the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. On the agenda, I have 1 set of minutes of the June 19th, 2023 Assembly for approval. Are there any changes that the Assembly would like to make to those minutes? Okay, seeing none, we'll just, everybody in favor of approving those minutes, just say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, minutes are approved. Are there now any amendments and or to the agenda, today's agenda? Okay, seeing none, the agenda stands as approved. With that, I'll move on. Today we have 1 public hearing. Public hearing for ordinance 2023-11, an ordinance amending the official zoning map for Service Area 1 of the Petersburg Borough to rezone portions of the Airport Addition subdivision and 13th Street relocation subdivision to public use. Any public testimony regarding ordinance 2023-11 should be given during this public hearing. Copy of ordinance 2023-11 may be found under agenda item 14A. Is there anybody that would like to speak to the public hearing for ordinance 2023-11? Okay. Okay. Please step forward, Mr. Hofstadter.
Good afternoon. My name is Phil Hofstadter, and I have the privilege of serving as the CEO of Petersburg Medical Center. Today, I stand before you to express my support for ordinance number 2023-11, which seeks to rezone the proposed site for the development of PMC's new facility for public use. Though I had the opportunity to offer testimony in favor of this ordinance during its first reading, I feel compelled to reiterate my support. The application for rezoning and replatting represents the culmination of several years of meticulous planning and collaboration. Our journey included engaging the community through community cafes, open houses, development of professional master plan, as well as a series of collaborative work sessions with the borough and the hospital. The collective effort culminated in the approval of the Borough Resolution 2023-04, which allocates a specific plot of borough land for the construction of the new facility. Healthcare serves as a pillar of any thriving community, and the establishment of this new building is integral in ensuring the healthy and safe environment for our patients, residents, and staff. The selected site embodies the collective efforts and aspirations of our community to bring a state-of-the-art facility to fruition. It affords us the flexibility to adopt a phased construction approach while continuing to provide uninterrupted services to the community. Thank you for your time. Phil.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to speak to? Okay. Please step forward and state your name.
My name is Cindy Lagodakis. I am the Vice President of the Petersburg Medical Center Hospital Board, and I'm having trouble with bifocal lens here, so bear with me. There are significant, I'm speaking to ordinance 2023-11, the amending the zoning map for public use. There are significant alternatives for housing lots in the area that's being considered. The same does not hold true for the hospital. Due to earthquake safety and other issues, the current facility needs to be replaced. It is the largest employer in the borough and provides services not only locally, but to regional communities. And we have engaged in a multi-year, multifaceted public outreach that has included community cafes, site visits with engineers and staff, radio conversations, maps, information posted online, Borough Assembly presentations, news stories, and more. The criticism that there's not been an adequate public outreach is unfounded. I also want to share that there have been a number of recommendations that have been incorporated during this public outreach process. And those recommendations came from the community, from staff, and from the borough. And having lived in a community that only had a public health nurse, I think some folks in this community don't understand the value of having a functioning hospital in this community. When you only have the option to be medevaced out for any kind of emergency or most of your health care, that is a significant burden on a resident. This hospital does not serve only as a Band-Aid station. We do chemotherapy, dialysis, chronic health care, physical therapy, school health screenings, community wellness, flu clinics, health fairs, long-term care, and those are just some of the services that are provided. The Borough Assembly has voted in favor of the new hospital facility, and we now ask that the borough approve the zoning map changes and allows this project to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Anybody else would like to talk to the ordinance 2023-11? Okay, please come forward and state your name and who you represent.
Earl Madolin, representing myself. I've been before the Planning and Zoning Commission a few times over the years, and before the City Council once on an appeal. I believe that when you buy property in a neighborhood and it's zoned in one manner or another, that you should have a reasonable expectation. It's not going to be replatted, rezoned, and changed to something else. And that's what's happening in this case. And I think I was at the Planning and Zoning Commission, and this new hospital scheme doesn't really adversely affect our home in the neighborhood. But there are other neighbors that are very concerned about it, and it's going to disrupt them. And they're next to residential zone property in the obvious place to expand residential housing in town within walk-in distance of schools, et cetera, et cetera. And I think they have a reasonable expectation that you won't just arbitrarily change the zoning on it. Now, as far as this whole hospital thing was, maybe there's not any other public use zone land in town. Now, I was on planning and zoning in the 80s when this new hospital was being built, and that took up the entire block that it's on now, replacing a much smaller facility. And it was built to the highest standards of the day, with the idea that it would serve our needs for the foreseeable future by whatever retrofits necessary. I don't know if it's going to fall down an earthquake. I know they retrofit buildings all over the country for earthquake safety. I think that discarding that building, I didn't know till at the last planning and zoning meeting that the reason it would be so expensive to use the existing site was that the plan was to demolish the entire building built in the 80s with the abundance of state oil money to the highest standards, demolish the whole building and start over from scratch. Obviously, that's very expensive. I think that you need to rethink the whole plan, but I think you really need to listen to the Planning and Zoning Commission. They wanted more information. Obviously, they weren't engaged when all these coffee houses and little get-togethers in the little echo chamber for building a new cushy facility were going on. Nobody talked to Planning and Zoning about it. So I think that you should not rezone that land. I think it should go back to Planning and Zoning and let them talk about it, and maybe there's a better site. And I think it's a crying shame that so much work has gone into planning and for this facility without engaging the neighbors in the neighborhood and the Planning and Zoning Commission. So that's my thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Anybody else would like to talk to 2023-11.
Yes, my name's Heather Kahn and I represent myself. As a community in Petersburg, I feel that it's imperative that we take proactive measures before our circumstances escalate into an emergency. Putting off proper planning for our healthcare will only lead to a catastrophic situation that will ultimately increase the costs and result in attempting to renovate an obsolete building. Renovation's not a viable option at this point. The associated costs are just too steep and would burden our borough with millions of dollars. To put things into perspective, a modest renovation of the kitchen in 2017 amounted in $350,000, and it didn't even resolve all the issues. Later on, the pipes, which were not included in the renovation, later caused a sewer backup, leading to another unplanned project. More recently, in 2020, the renovation of a pharmacy storage room for hazardous material cost us $450,000. Our facility is significantly outdated, and knocking down one wall would require bringing the facility up to current standards and codes. A full-scale renovation, as outlined in the 2020 master plan, is the most expensive option and would require PMC to close services as it renovates. Where will we be during this time period? A new hospital not only has a better chance to be funded through grants, it allows PMC to build in phases to accommodate this funding and not interrupt all current services. Our decision towards supporting a new building today will have the long-lasting implications for ourselves, our children, and future generations. We must consider questions like, where will we reside as we age? Whether we will have access to local long-term care, or will we need to move elsewhere for that care? The window for making these choices is narrowing, and inaction or delays will result in the gradual loss of services and potentially even closing down of departments. It will cost us more in the long run, both in healthcare as a community and with personal costs of receiving these services outside of Petersburg. This is a beautiful place, especially on a day like today. Highly sought after for residency, and how do we ensure that it remains appealing for our children and their children? One critical step for me is by providing quality healthcare services at a locally controlled level. We have that here right now. We need to continue with that. I urge you to participate in our public meetings, everyone. Our meetings are part of the Open Meetings Act with all agendas and meeting minutes available for review on the PMC webpage. It's not hidden, it's out there. PMC has had many past, current, and future opportunities for communication about the projects through work sessions, community cafes, and open houses. The time for indecision and hesitancy is over, and if we do not act decisively, the unavoidable consequence will be the gradual shutdown of essential services in Petersburg. Additionally, each barrier costs us significantly in time and the use of our precious grant funding, and it also risks losing our funders if the community is not aligned. Our borough has provided us with 5 properties to consider, one of which is not an option for us to use. You can find all of the detailed information on the medical center's website, www.pmcak.org. It's under new facility. It's at the top bar, or in the 2015 facility conditional assessment. Among the available options in 5 years of vetting with the master plan, community input, professional assessments of costs, environmental studies and test digs, the borough PMC work sessions and resolutions, the one that stands out was proposed as the most cost-effective and suitable for Petersburg. However, to pursue this option, we need your support. The choices we make now will shape our community's future, and if you envision a Petersburg where you and your family can have access to quality long-term care and a thriving community, I urge you to take action. Let's work together, making Petersburg a place that offers essential services, starting with quality medical care for all. I'm in favor of rezoning and platting the land, and strongly encourage you to consider the facts and think about our collective future while making this decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to talk to ordinance 2023-11?
Hi, I'm Mary Clemens. I'm representing myself and my neighbor Lizzie Thompson, who could not make the meeting here today. I live at 804 Fram. She lives across the street at 3, I believe it is, and which is adjacent to the property that's being referred to in ordinance 2023-11. I'm in favor of a new hospital and believe this area can work as a new site for the hospital. Of course, it will be a big change in the neighborhood. Change is hard. I admit I will miss the beautiful open muskeg beside my house, but I have been keeping track of the hospital board's work for the new facility and their site recommendations. I trust the process the hospital board has gone through to select the best possible site for a new hospital. I attended the open house in May and spoke to project managers about my concerns about minimizing impacts to our neighborhood. They listened and were open to ideas and input. I want this open conversation to continue with the adjacent property owners. Again, this will be a big change in our neighborhood, and change is hard. But I believe we can work with the project managers to help mitigate the impacts to our neighborhood. I believe ordinance 2023-11 should be passed and the area rezoned to public use. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Anybody else that would like to talk to 2023-11? Seeing none, is there anybody on the line that would like?
There
to
is
talk?
not.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'll move on. There is one bid award today, but that bid award is going to be handled under item 15A as a resolution. And with that, I'm going to move on. Persons to be heard related to today's agenda. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to talk to items related to today's agenda? Please come forward, state your name and who you represent. Okay, seeing none. Clerk, is there anybody on the line that would like to talk to items related to today's agenda?
Well, I do have a hand up now. Yes, Jennifer Briner. I will allow her to talk here.
Okay. Yes,
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
we can hear you just fine.
Oh, thank you. Anyway, my name is Jennifer Briner. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. And although I am representing myself, I have worked for PMC for 27 years, or will have on Thursday. I fully support ordinance 2023-11 to rezone the reference land to public use. The Borough Assembly has already recommended that PMC go forward with the building project on this site, which was selected after many months and years of study, expert recommendation, consideration of costs, and best use of the land. As we learned at the last meeting, the Borough of Petersburg is rich in land available for future development of single and multifamily homes. Building a new hospital at this site will not affect the potential for future homes in convenient areas. I realize that PMC might not be the new neighbors that people living nearby hoped they'd have. Like family, you usually can't choose your neighbors, but you hope the good ones move in next door. I have been at every steering committee meeting and many meetings with Bettysworth Architects, and being a good neighbor has been mentioned at every single one. We want to be good neighbors. I believe we are good neighbors currently, and have and will continue to keep this forefront in the design process. Petersburg needs excellent health care, and to continue to provide that care, we need a new building soon. Further delays will only increase costs and increase the impending risk of a catastrophic failure of our current building. Please vote in favor of ordinance 2023-11, which is a vote for a strong and thriving Petersburg. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Clerk, is there anybody else on the line that would, on items related to today's agenda?
There is not.
Okay, thank you. I'll move on then to persons to be heard on related to items on today's agenda. And the audience first, is there anybody who would like to talk to items unrelated to today's agenda? If there are, please come forward and state your name and who you represent. Thank you.
Harold Madolin, representing myself, and this is about the hospital in general. Now, I just learned with the flyer that came in the mail about the planning and zoning meeting, it stated the hospital was built in 1955. Actually, my wife came to town in 1979 as a nurse to work at the hospital. And she says, I never worked in that hospital. I worked in the little old hospital that was on Excel Street, which is, there's only vestiges of that remain. This hospital, and I don't know why it's being misrepresented that way, unless it's for an excuse to tear down the building and build something new and expensive. But I object to that misrepresentation of the age of the facility. It's not that old. It's newer than this building, which has been retrofitted. It's newer than both of our school buildings. It's newer than, I pointed out at the Planning and Zoning Commission, we have the oldest operating cannery in Alaska, right here in Petersburg. And I believe when they started in at the turn of the last century, they were still soldering cans together and things like that. There's been many changes of technology over the years, many retrofits, new boilers, things like that. And I know when they were building this new hospital that takes up the entire block, where the old one took up about 25% of it, in the 80s, it was built to the highest standards. Now, maybe it's going to fall down in an earthquake. I doubt it. I suppose it'll be the last building to fall down, and maybe this one has been retrofitted for earthquake safety when they did the renovation a few years ago. I don't know, but I object to the way this whole project is being approached. I think what we need is go to the voters. There's a lot of skepticism about this hospital and its management in this town. To have a building that they've been planning for 7 years or 10 years or something to build a new hospital, and it was only 30 years old, you know, that either they've run it into the ground in a quite a hurry, or we're being told we're not being told the whole truth. And it looks to me like they're trying to build a bigger, more expensive long-term care facility. Now, my parents both had a lot to do with that long-term care facility. My mother played music there for 40 years, once a week. My father went up every weekend and visited the old timers there. They both had a dread of that place and told us kids, we do not want to wind up in that joint under any circumstances. So my dad, 5 years before he died, he wound up really sick. He had chronic health problems. He wound up in the hospital. They stabilized him. He was dehydrated and put him on some antibiotics. The second day he was there, they started pushing papers on my mother to put him in long-term care. And his doctor said, well, it's the progression of the disease. So us kids chimed up and said, have you guys talked to Virginia Mason, who provides his real health care? Oh, I guess we could do that. Great disappointment. They shipped him off to Virginia Mason on a medevac. They turned him around and got another 5 years out of him. And he never did set foot in that long-term care thing, but they would have been happy to have him for $1,000 a day or whatever they charge. And another little, we went to visit a friend that wound up there from Juneau, and my mother told me, yeah, this guy's in there and he knows you guys. We went and saw him, and he said, he didn't like that place. And the most memorable comment he had was about the food. He says, I've had better food at Lemon Creek Penitentiary. Anyway, that's all I have to say. I think you guys need to put it to the voters. I think there's a lot, the echo chamber about designing it. We can come here and listen to all the hospital employees say how we need it. I read in the paper where the CEO said that the employees of the medical center approve of the new site, but I think you need to go to the voters. Planning commission first, maybe, but to the voters. Because this is on you guys. If we build this expensive $100 million facility and it falls flat and we turn it over to search in a few years or whatever, that's the choice of you few people up here. But if all us voters make the choice, we can all swim in it together. But I think it should go to the voters. Just because we're going to get free money from somewhere else to pay for this whole thing, free money can be just as badly invested as our own money. And I think you guys really need to think long and hard about this. So.
Thank you for testimony. Anybody else on items unrelated to today's agenda that would like to talk? Okay. Anybody on, again, on Zoom that,
No hands up.
okay, thank you. With that, I'll move on to board commission and committee reports. There is nothing on today's agenda. Next item is the consent agenda, and we have one item under the consent agenda. It's the renewal of the bottle shop liquor license. The bottle shop has applied with the Alaska Alcohol and Marijuana Control Office for retail package store liquor license renewal. The assembly may support or protest application. The protest may not be arbitrary, capricious, or unreasonable. Do I have a motion to approve the relicensing of liquor license for the bottle shop?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call roll?
David,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Donna,
That passes with six people in favor of it, with the mayor being excused. Next item is report of other officers, excuse me. The first item under there is the Petersburg Medical Center update. PMC CEO Hofstadter will update the assembly on medical center activities. Mr. Hofstadter.
Yeah, thank you. Phil Hofstadter, Petersburg Medical Center CEO. I provided a written report. I don't know if there's any questions. I'll provide just a few highlights here. Number one is we are having our annual fundraiser through the Petersburg Medical Center Foundation. It's the Pedal and In Paddle Battle. That'll be on July 29th, Saturday. Paddlers will start at 10 o'clock and the pedalers at 11. Again, it's to support our education and scholarship program through the foundation. Obviously, there's a lot going on with space with the new facility. And of note was the planning and design team from Betters Work North was here a couple of weeks ago to meet with the staff and work with the steering committee on the final design, work with managers on the final design to get it as tight as possible. It'll go in front of the steering committee in a couple of weeks, and we'll make further decisions there. Our financials, we're doing better financially recovering, finally stopping the flow of this post-COVID sort of recovery. We have had some positive cash flow in the last 3 months, which is great. We had to repay $5 million in Medicare advance as a result of the COVID over the last 3 years, which is a big success. We've also applied and landed a number of grants for our programs related to Kinderskog, home health, prevention. And so far we've received upwards of almost $500,000 related to FY24. We have about another $700,000 pending for programs and behavioral health in FY24. We're very excited about some of the home-based programs, expanding our home health and adult day program. I know that they're here in the audience here, and that's some of the nice things that we've been may be able to do in the future are actually pretty exciting for providing services into the community. We continue to work collaboratively with Mountain View Manor and assisting with some of their billing and claims, and I'll look forward to improving and working on that in the future. We also are working with Search on an agreement where we're bringing some endoscopy and colonoscopy services. Hopefully their team came on site, and we're also excited working with some of their specialty programs to deliver that maybe at the end of September. I believe that's all I had. Any questions?
Member Kitchener.
Phil, could you explain to people that are listening how the daycare center is going to work
The daycare center for,
for adults?
oh, well, I got the expert in the room. Do you mind if I have the program manager speak on that?
Please do.
All right. It's always better to hear from the subject matter expert than myself.
Thank you. My name is Kirsten Testoni and I'm the manager of the home health department. And since I arrived here 3 years ago, it became abundantly clear that there is a lack of really good caregiving for people that want to remain in the community. There's also a lack of support for caregivers. And so having had experience with other programs and looking at how do we expand without impacting or promising things that we actually can't come up with, the idea of the adult day center grew, and it is now becoming a reality. And the way that that's going to work, we're still working out some of the details. There will be a couple of funding opportunities. We're working on becoming, we are a Medicaid waiver provider, but we have to get approval and certification under that program to accept waiver participants. There'll be a private pay option, and there'll probably be a sliding scale option. And also there are several long-term care insurances that will pick up the bill. And the idea is to offer, right now, thank you to the borough for some assistance on this. We are able to provide a half-day service up at Mountain View Manor in the non-assisted side. We'll be doing a morning program 4 days a week. And that program will be essentially more like a senior center. One of our big goals is to not make it very clinical. We don't want it to feel like the hospital. We don't want it to feel like you're going to a program that is really regimented. We're actually gonna be holding 4 different community cafes coming up on the 20th of July, August 3rd, August 20, and 2 in July and 2 in August. And that will be an opportunity for folks to come and ask a lot of questions. We're going to hold 2 of them in the library and 2 of them up at PIA. So there'll be more information to come. But the idea would be to have a program where we would provide transportation, support, activity, give caregivers a break. As we roll this out and it grows, we'd like it to become a place where folks don't have a really good shower in their home or a place to wash their hair, that we'll be able to offer that. It will be a place for people who are caregivers to bring their loved one, or we'll pick them up and drop them off in order to have a little bit of a break, a day off. Unfortunately, we don't have the opportunity to provide overnight or anything like that yet, but that's also in the works. So it's going to be a really nice opportunity. And I don't want to call it a daycare. I really want to look at it as an adult day program, but really more of a senior center focus so that it doesn't feel like a clinical environment. I don't know if that answers your questions.
Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Just another question while you're up there. Will the new facility have space to expand this program?
So I can't answer that, but we are in talks with another community agency, and we may be, we've been offered some space in that building, and we're working with them because actually it's a program that we want. It's connected to the hospital. We are a hospital program, but we really feel like it would be more attractive to people if it didn't feel like the hospital. So there's some opportunity there as well.
Julie, any
Yes,
questions?
for
Member
Phil.
Marshall, please.
Through the mayor. Thank you. So, Mr. Hofstadter, I'm wondering, with these specialty clinics, could you describe others that might be in the work besides the colonoscopy, endoscopy?
You bet. Yeah. So one area that we brought on was optometry. So we had an optometrist coming to our facility on a regular basis. And we've expanded some of the services related to early on with chiropractor. That's been a few years now. That was an expanded service. We brought on behavioral health, which is a specialty, which wasn't there before, audiology. And so we are looking for cardiology, a clinic as well, to provide some specific services they're really more clinic based. So we have if you go to specialists, you get a procedure done elsewhere. You still need to follow up, and in things like dermatology, those areas we want to be able to expand and grow. We hear that's a big need in the community. We want to be able to provide that. And even if we can't provide specifically in a sterile operating room service, we want to be able to provide those specialty providers the opportunity to come on site and provide clinic and follow up and minor procedures.
And is that specifically directed for the search specialty providers?
No, what's nice about us as a community hospital, we're unaffiliated. So we can work with search, as we should with some specialties, but we could also work with Ketchikan Peace Health. We can work with Bartlett. We can work with Virginia Mason. We can work with Harborview. We can work with Providence Regional. It allows us the opportunity to pick and choose the specialists that maybe have specific tertiary care facilities may have better specialties than others, so it doesn't limit us.
Any other questions from the assembly? Thank you, Mr.
Thanks.
Hofstadter. One other item under the reported by other officers is mine, and I attended by Zoom a meeting of the SEPA board last week. And I want to make a little presentation on that. The board approved the contract for Robert Seidman, who's now the new CEO for SEPA. The second item we did was power sales for the three communities reached a record high this spring, thereby deferring potential wholesale rate increases. It's a record. I mean, it's about 5% above any previous sales that we did this past winter, which is pretty significant. The board discussed the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission relicensing for both Swan Lake and Tyee reservoirs. SEPA is about to start the complex process for relicensing, and it is complex. Estimated cost per reservoir is $3 to $4 million. The board authorized the CEO and council to contract for help to lead SEPA through the process. Discussion will occur at a later date whether to include adding a third turbine for Tyee and to possibly change reservoir draft limits on Tyee as part of the relicensing process or as a separate action. Snowpack was about a third higher than average, so we're in good shape to supply the power needs to the three communities for the summer. The long-term forecast is for warmer and wetter weather to come. The board discussed the need for a policy on alternative power, and that would be wind, solar, geothermal, what have you. The discussion raised multiple issues, including a legal issue of the existing power sales agreement, which requires all three communities to buy their power from SEPA before going elsewhere for power. And then we also looked at compensation to both SEPA and the ratepayers if we were to do something else related to the grid and the grid resiliency, and also the cost to maintain the grid. The subject needs a lot more discussion and some very hard data before there's any decisions even to come forward. Presentation was made on the increase in loads for the three communities. Loads in the past tracked very closely with heating needs. 4 years ago, loads began to exceed heating needs. This past year, Petersburg has had more than a 3% increase in loads over what just heating is. And between the three communities, Ketchikan has had a 5% increase in loads. Last, the board will be scheduling a work session, and I think we scheduled it for August 30th to delve deeply into the load forecast and look at the future, to look at relicensing, alternative power, and new power generation. And that's all I have, unless there's questions from the assembly. Member Marsh.
Thank you. I do have questions. So, on the load capacity. Well, first off, would you explain the grid resiliency, please?
The grid, there is a power grid that goes between Ketchikan, Wrangell, and Petersburg. And it's, there's power poles. Each of those poles out there cost about $100,000, and I can't remember how many out there, but a significant number. And of course, then you have the underground cables between Wrangell and Petersburg and so forth. So that grid, no matter what we do, has to be maintained in order to keep power moving back and forth between the different communities. Does that kind of answer?
So
your
the
question?
resiliency, well, you've got maintenance separate
Wait.
from resiliency.
Right.
Is there a difference?
Not really,
Okay.
in my mind. Thank
Okay.
you.
I do have a second question, and that is, so if we are already 3% over, well, we've had a 3% increase in our load demand. What would something like a new hospital do to that demand? And at what point does the demand exceed the generation capacity?
There's a couple points there. Is that where we exceeded is in the January, February, in that time frame is where the three communities exceed what we can provide. And it generally goes on for about a period of a week. At that time, all three communities are on generator power, and of course that increases costs. Would the hospital increase that load significantly? obviously there will be some increase, but I think the much bigger increase is going to be from Ketchikan and the cruise ships. Ketchikan is looking at putting in a brand new cruise ship docks, and that would have hookup for power for, you're looking at cruise ships with 3,000 to 4,000 people on board. And those are where the huge loads are gonna come from. And what we would produce from the other communities would be kind of minuscule between what those would be.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, with that, I'll move on to the mayor's report, and the mayor's report's fairly short. There is one item that I really would like to talk about, and that's our APEI safety and HR review. APEI has requested to extend their timeline to complete the safety and HR review requested by the Assembly by approximately 1 month. July 1st is the annual insurance renewal for each member of APEI, and also APEI's busiest time of the year due to a large rate increase in liability insurance. Their members are understandably requesting alternative quotes to mitigate the increases. In addition, the documents and materials they have received from the borough for the review are many, and the executive director, Thurston, feels that the final work product would be much more useful if they have more time to complete the review than originally proposed. The new timeline proposes to review all documentation, interview borough management staff, and speak with borough employees in person on August 15th and 16th. Submit a completed report to the Assembly by August 31st, and provide a formal presentation of the report to the Assembly at the September 18th Assembly meeting. Last item is Happy Independence Day. Have a safe and fun-filled Independence Day celebration tomorrow, July 4th. And with that, I'll move on to manager report.
Thank you, sir. Our DC delegation has announced the Alaska awards from the latest round of the RAISE grants. The Scow Bay project, which was our submission, was not among them. It remains pending as a congressional dedicated spending request in both the House and the Senate. The RAISE awards did include $10 million for the Cake Access Road as one of the 4 Alaska projects funded. We recently received a letter from the Regulatory Commission of Alaska noting that when the borough was formed, the city failed to seek a transfer of our utility certificates from the old city to the new borough. Carl and Chris will work on getting this completed. Thanks to Water and Public Works employees, we recently replaced a failing valve at 3rd and Fram Streets. And Public Works dug a test pit at the Pump Station 4 wet well site recently to investigate subsurface materials and groundwater infiltration issues. The dig went well, with blue clay being encountered sooner than we expected, and no evidence of groundwater infiltration that would cause problems for the project. The engineer continues to work on the design for the project. New employees at Power and Light are being trained to operate the diesel plant in the event of a local power outage. Our customers should expect that restoration of power will take a slight bit longer than in previous history as the new operators are being trained and getting up to speed on the process. Power and Light successfully submitted an application for the Department of Energy Hydro Energy Efficiency Grant on June 19th. This grant has the potential to provide up to $2.8 million to the hydro rebuild and shift that same amount of local bond proceeds to the Scow Bay generator project. Assisted Living continues to work with the hospital on gathering information for a time clock system like what is used at the hospital, and also helping us coordinate nurse coverage for assisted living. Property tax bills were mailed out on Friday, June 30th. The payment due date is October 16th. If you have any questions, please contact the Finance Department at 907-772-4425. For our employees, open enrollment is happening now through July 15th for our new health insurance provider, MODA. This means changes to health insurance can be made without a qualifying event. Representatives for the borough's MODA health insurance plan will be in Petersburg on Thursday, July 13th. There will be 2 mandatory meetings at 9 and 12:30 on July 13th for the employees that have the borough's health insurance. The meetings will be about an hour long. Thanks to Martin and the Public Works crew, we replaced about 20 deck planks on the Rasmussen Bridge. This is to keep the bridge safe for traffic until we can do a full deck replacement later this year. Also been working on some of the smoothing out some of the rough patches out at Frederick Drive. We're still looking for a motor pool mechanic. We have not had any applicants to date. We are considering the development of an apprenticeship type program to fill this position. Motor pool foreman Sam Hoshar recently traveled to Florida with representatives from the volunteer fire department to inspect the borough's newly completed fire engine. The new engine looks great and will now be shipped west for final upfitting before being barged to Petersburg. The borough's free household hazardous waste collection event was held on June 24th and 25th. The waste collected during the event totaled together with material already stockpiled on site totaled over 29,500 pounds. It's enough hazardous material to completely fill a 40-foot shipping container, which will now be sent south for proper disposal. Thanks to the sanitation crew and the contractor, U.S. Ecology, for everything they did to make this event a big success. With our solid waste transshipment contract set to expire in August, we are still looking into alternative waste disposal providers for the borough's municipal solid waste and recyclables. We have a couple of quotes in hand and are working through the numbers. We should have a contract recommendation for me to look at and the assembly to consider at the second meeting in July. Building maintenance assisted island refrigeration with compressor replacement in one of the HVAC units at the motor pool shop. And we are looking at working on a preliminary estimate for the fire sprinkler system replacement project at the Baylor. Parks and Rec is closed today and tomorrow to host the holiday events downtown. Please everyone join them downtown for activities and events. And Parks and Rec will be hosting a sprint triathlon on July 8th at 10 a.m. Contact Parks and Rec or Scott Burt for more information. We have more swimming lessons coming up here, both, I think it's next week. Please contact Parks and Rec for information and registration. Thank you to Pat Blair and others for their work at the bike park location on June 25th. Keep an eye out for more opportunities to volunteer and join the fun. I've asked Glorianne to work with some members of the community and the Harbor Board to outline some of the needed repairs to the seaplane float and facility. This would be the first step in trying to get the state to take better care of this local asset. I have spoken to DOT, and at this point, it's not likely we'll get state money, but we're still working on trying to outline what needs to be done, and maybe potentially this becomes a capital project request for our future requests. The borough continues to work with our insurance broker and our IT vendor on implementation of requirements for cyber insurance coverage. Most of the requirements have been completed. I was able to attend the changing of the command for the Pike last week. Great ceremony, and got to welcome the new skipper, Master Chief Kay Jones. Borough staff, including Glorianne, Stephanie, and I were present, along with Captain Jensen from Sector Juneau and representatives from our DC delegation. Was able to meet with Sherry Klein, the Senator's Southeast Alaska representative, and Robin Ingabus, who is Senator Sullivan's DC Deputy Chief of Staff, to discuss Petersburg issues. This was Robin's first visit to Petersburg, and thanks to Glorianne, who made them all feel at home. And that's it, unless there's questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the assembly? Member Mucci?
Yeah, thank you. You know, just a question for Steve about the $10 million for the Cake Access Road. Are we in discussions with anybody who's putting that plan together so that Petersburg can weigh in on if it's coming closer to Petersburg? I know there's been talk about extending the road to 5 Mile or closer to Petersburg. Are we in any type of discussion with anybody else on projects like this?
You're the mayor. At this point, no. It's kind of a surprise. This was an application submitted by the Organized Village of Cake. And I've not yet even seen the grant application. So we're trying to get our hands on that so we can know kind of what the project looks like. The description of the project says they're extending access from 12 Mile to 5 Mile Creek, and then some work closer to Cake, and then some widening activities and planning. But that's just based on their cover sheet, not the actual grant application. So we'll continue to try to get more detailed information. All of the work is currently outside the borough's boundaries. So the village has no real requirement to let us know, but we kind of like to know a little bit about what the plans are. So keep on it.
All right, thank you.
Other questions from Member Feinwash?
Yeah, I was hoping you could expand a little bit on the situation with the seaplane float. I mean, what are the problems with it? And we're talking about trying to get the state to step in maybe and do some renovations, but if that doesn't work, you mentioned a capital project, so would we potentially be paying to fix the seaplane float, or would that happen in conjunction with some transfer in ownership and control of that asset? What's going on there?
Through the mayor, it's kind of a mess, to be honest with you. I was hearing from local folks that it was in bad shape. So I started reaching out, taking a look at it, reached out to the state. They agree it's in bad shape, but they have no money and are not going to do anything about it, at least at this point. So I'm going to continue those discussions, also with our local folks who use it, to have a better idea as far as the details of what's going on. Is it rotting pilings? Is it floats that are failing? I think it's a little bit of all of that. It is a state facility. The borough has no liability to do anything. But on the other hand, we have a lot of people who live here that use it. So I think it kind of bothers me that the state is passing on their obligation to take care of it. But if it goes on our capital project list, it has nothing to do with how we spend money. It has to do with me asking for money. So that's something the assembly has to vote on when we come back around at that time of the year again. But I'd bring it forward potentially at this point for the assembly to say, do you want it on the capital project list or not? And beyond that, I don't know a lot yet. I finally got a name of a person to actually talk to towards the end of last week. And they're willing to talk to us, but they were very clear that they have no money and they tried to give the float to the borough, which I told them I cannot accept that at this point.
Mark, you had a question?
Thank you. And that was my next question. Is there interest in the borough or in the harbor department to acquire that as a borough property?
I think there's interest,
Okay.
but it'd be nice to know how expensive a project it would be. Yeah. I mean, and interest means the assembly has to weigh in on that at some point. I think the harbor board and the harbor department are intrigued by the idea, but they also we have no idea what it would cost to fix it at this point. And so any kind of decision related to ownership would have to come back to the assembly. And my assumption is the assembly would have a lot more questions than I'm able to answer right now. So.
Other questions from the assembly? Okay. Member Kemper.
Now, my understanding is if the road is extended, the Cake Road to 5 Mile, that will actually be in borough property. You think at some point they would contact us since, it's on our property. And then the follow-up question, which I'm sure you don't know the answer to, but I'll ask it anyway, is do we assume any liability for this road if they construct it on borough property? Are we going to be asked to maintain it? Are we going to ask to respond to accidents? Will we at some point enter into some sort of negotiation with Cake trying to determine who's going to do what, or is it just going to be there?
Those are all really good questions. I wish the organized village would have talked to us about it as part of their grant application. They did not. In the past, Cake has been not in favor of the road. So this was a bit of a surprise to all of us. First thing we were aware of was when they got the grant. So I don't know how to answer your question at this point. Right now, we actually don't have liability for providing police or services outside of Service Area 1. So a police issue would likely still involve the troopers. It does not mean the troopers wouldn't turn around and ask us to help respond. I'll be honest with you, we don't have the equipment to respond over there. You're talking four-wheelers or snowcats in the wintertime or something like that. And we don't have access to that right now. So that's why it'd be really good to have that conversation with them when they're ready to talk.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to move on to unfinished business. Under unfinished business, we have ordinance 2023-11. An ordinance amending the official zoning map for Service Area 1 of the Petersburg Borough to rezone portions of the Airport Addition subdivision and 13th Street relocation subdivision to public use. If approved in 3 readings, ordinance 2023-11 will rezone portions of the Airport Addition and 13th Street relocation subdivisions from single-family residential, commercial 1, multifamily residential, and open space recreation to public use in preparation for proposed future construction of a new medical center. The Planning Commission recommends the subject property not be rezoned due to the lack of public education on the issue, lack of public input on the pros and cons of the rezone, and loss of single-family and multifamily residential lots. The Assembly unanimously approved ordinance 2023 in its first reading. Do I have a motion to approve ordinance 2023?
So move.
Second. Okay, it's been moved by member Kensinger, second by member Mucci. Discussion. Member Marsh.
Yes, thank you. Just for the record, I was that one opposing vote at the first reading. And I will oppose it again, for the reasons that I've stated, that I think this is far beyond the scope of what Petersburg can handle. We don't have funding to construct it. We've got some promises, we've got some maybes, but we don't have anything in 5-10 years. This is going to be an aging facility that's going to be more than 20,000 square feet above and beyond what we have now. And I think the amount of staff that will be required to maintain it, everything from the grounds to the internal workings of it, to the IT, to the whole gamut, is going to be so cost prohibitive that it's, I'm not going to say fail, but I could see another entity waiting in the wings for such an opportunity to help us out and take over. So I'm not going to support this.
Thank you. Other member Kensinger.
Yes, I had a lot of the same concerns that Harold Medallion had about the old hospital and why we just couldn't fix it up. Much like Harold, I showed up here in '79 before the new hospital was built, and I thought, well, shoot, I remember when we built that thing. But I don't know the exact years, quite a few years ago, that there was a report that was done on the condition of the hospital. And I took the time and I looked at that report, and to be quite honest, I was shocked. I mean, I was not only shocked, I was alarmed. And that, as a result of reading that report and doing the due diligence and doing some follow-up questions with some of the people that actually work on the hospital, and actually taking a look at some of the systems that that hospital relies upon, it was pretty evident to me that we had to do something different. Yes, I think it was unfortunate that when we rebuilt that hospital in the early '80s, that it did not incorporate what a lot of earthquake standards that were in place at that time, but they just chose not to put them in that facility. The last thing that we want to have happen in an accident or any type of event in this community, because we're isolated, you can't drive to the next community, you know, and if we have an earthquake, a tsunami, or any other type of calamity here, the one structure that we want to have standing at the end of the day is a hospital. Because if we don't have that building standing, we're going to be in a world of hurt, because it's a long ways by helicopter, and there's a good possibility if we have an event of that nature, we will not even have an airport that's functioning. So we need to have a hospital that will stand a relatively large earthquake, which hopefully will not happen in our lifetimes, but you know something that might happen in our children's lifetimes. So we need a facility that's earthquake proof. My understanding is this new facility is going to be cheaper to operate. It's not going to take as much electricity. It's going to be a lot more efficient facility than the current one. They've assured me that it's not going to require additional staff. They're not planning on additional staff. So the economics of operating a hospital here in this town is going to be a lot better. You know, if you're a business person, you want to look at what your operational costs are. And it's pretty evident to me with this new plan, this new hospital, it's going to cost us less to operate that hospital, particularly when you consider some of the failing systems in the existing facility. I mean, I challenge anybody to go up and take a look at I should say, the lack of proper sewage facilities in the current facility, particularly in the older part of the hospital. I mean, we're really only one plug away from having to send people out of town. So I really encourage everybody that has questions. The information's out there. A lot of this information has been out there for a large number of years. Having a vote on it, I do not support. Every one of us up here ran for office. One of the questions I was asked is whether I'd support a new hospital. And when I did my due diligence, then I said, yes, I support it. You elected me and we elect the hospital board. And a lot of times it sounds good to have a vote of the general public, but a lot of things get twisted, as we know in our society nowadays. And, you know, the time for a vote on whether we had a new hospital or not was probably 5 to 7 years ago, not now. We're too far along in the process. I'm afraid that if we throw it back to planning and zoning, they had their opportunity to do their due diligence and to read the material. And for whatever reason, they felt they didn't have the information. I can't rectify that. But the one thing that I don't want to see is seeing this project delayed. I know it's expensive, but I'd also like to point out, unlike most of the other communities in Southeast Alaska, our hospital doesn't come and ask for an annual appropriation of this body. It's a self-funding organization. We have very few utilities in this community that pay their own way. And they're not asking anybody, and I'll say this slowly, there's not asking anybody in town to bond to build a new hospital. So what that means is when you get your property tax bill, you're not going to see an extra addition on there for the new PMC hospital. That's not how the plan is. I know a lot of people don't like to use other people's money to do things, but this is how we build hospitals in the United States. It not only happens here, but it happens everywhere else in every community across the country. This is how we build healthcare facilities. If another entity like Search or Peace Health came in to build a facility here, they would use the same mechanism and the same things to try and fund that facility. So I don't see the reason to delay. I want to see this happen, and I want to see it happen sooner than later.
Thank you. Any other comments from assembly members? Okay, Member Marsh.
Has there been a study on the existing properties? I think there's 43 of them. If they were built with residential, single-family residential and multifamily residential, what the tax income would be, tax revenue on those homes would be, as opposed to, is there a tax burden for the hospital? To run a comparison. I don't know that answer.
Nor do I. Do you want to, are you asking then that we asked?
I'll respond to that. There's about 343 properties that are currently platted in the city or in the borough right now that are residential properties. I mean, all they are is lines on a map. Of course, if you develop those 43 properties that the hospital's going to take up there, you would get a lot of money for that property, no doubt about it. If we had all 343 plotted parcels with houses in the community, you know, we'd have a community of about 9,000 people. So the one thing that we do not lack in town is land. We have lots of land. We're fortunate in that. Most of our other communities in Southeast Alaska, you take Ketchikan, Wrangell, Sitka, Juneau, none of those communities have land. They can't even figure out a place to put in a couple condominiums. I mean, you know, but that's the one thing that we have in this community is abundant land. So I don't see it as by building a hospital there that we're going to somehow not have enough land available to build on in town. That's not going to happen. Maybe 100 years from now, that might be the case, but right now that is not the case.
I believe also at the last meeting, we asked Liz to follow up for us on a couple things. One was the number of lots available, and then I believe one of the members asked also those that had power or sewer close to that she was to report back, I believe, which I don't believe she's done yet, and followed up.
Thank you.
Member Meucci?
Yeah, thank you. For me, it's just one of the first things that we're asked when we meet with, whether it's members of the Coast Guard who are coming through here or policemen who we've hired to come and work here, or teachers, they want to know about housing, the school system and the hospital. And I think the borough is doing a good job of moving proactively to take care of those needs. I am concerned about the cost, but I think in this day and age, that's what a facility like that is going to cost. But I think this is a very important piece to the community. When this idea first was brought forward, I went on 2 or 3 tours of the existing facility. And it was very eye-opening, and I would encourage anybody who had some serious questions about why we need to move forward with a different facility to get a hold of somebody at the medical center and go on the same tour I've been on a couple times. It's rather scary, and we're kind of one sewer leak or sewer break from closing down that facility. And I think it's very important that we move forward with things. So, yeah, thank you.
Member Fine Wash?
I'll just make a brief comment. I think it's interesting. Earlier today, we heard during the SEPA report that our power usage is up across the board, and that's not explained solely by, temperature or anything like that. And it's indicative to me of kind of a general growth in the region. And I think it's important, correspondingly, that we have a facility that sort of plans for some growth, that we can kind of grow into, as opposed to continuing to slap a Band-Aid on our existing facility, even if maybe that's a little cheaper in the short run. It just makes sense to plan ahead and to anticipate some growth. I mean, I look around and people are scrambling to build houses in Petersburg. A lot of people are moving here now. So, I think it makes sense to build a facility, even if it feels a little big, a little expensive right now. I think it'll make sense by the time we finally get around to opening the doors, and in the decades that follow, it'll make a lot of sense to have a facility like that here.
Thank you. Member?
Actually, I have a question. We hear a lot about the financial burden potentially being put on the citizens of the community for the new hospital. And I haven't had time really to look at all the information. We had an email earlier from somebody that asked that same question, but actually went back and historically with the current hospital that we have now, was there in fact any financial burden put to the citizens of Petersburg that we know of?
Through the mayor, not that I'm aware of, but I don't know for sure.
Fair question to ask.
It's a fair question.
Consider.
And I would allow Mr. Hofstadter, if you'd like to address that, to do so.
Question again?
So the letter asked if, well, didn't ask, but I think more stated, not completely definitively, current hospital that we have, when that hospital was built, like who paid for it, and was there financial burden put to the citizens of Petersburg?
Yeah, I read a lot about it. I wasn't here at the time. And as our community member actually mentioned, the oil money, I think Ernie Hogan was the person at the time who from Petersburg that was able to get roughly, I think, $10 million from the state to build that. So the state actually supplied that. And I believe it was a mixture of a renovation. There was the existing older 50s building that was there. And then that was, there was some renovation, there was some demolition, and there was some remodel. So there was a mixture of the 3 on that site. And that's my understanding just from reading the articles at the time and research and the architects planning that we have in our facility.
Funding came from the state of Alaska.
I believe so. Again, I wasn't here, just from what I was reading.
I mean,
Yes.
I think it's a fair question for
Yeah.
everybody
Yeah.
to realize that, especially with the project of this magnitude, that this has got to come from somewhere else, and like
Correct.
how things are done.
Thank you, Mr. Hofstadter. Okay, I'm Member Kensinger, and then I'm gonna
Yeah, a follow-up question, Phil. You do not currently receive or have received an annual appropriation from the borough for hospital activities.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
With that, I'm going to ask the clerk to call roll on ordinance 2023-11, second reading.
Scott,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Donna, Jeff,
Yes.
The motion passes on 22 with a 5-1 vote with member Marsh declining. With that, I'll move on to new business. Resolution 2023-08, a resolution for bid award authorization for the community center sewer line project and increase in budget. If approved, resolution 2023-08 will authorize the award of the community center sewer line project to Ketchikan Mechanical, Inc. for an amount not to exceed $501,114.61 and will authorize transfer of an additional $84,114.61 from the property development fund to the project budget. Do I have a motion to approve this award?
So move.
Second.
Okay. Motion made by member Mucci, seconded by member Marsh. Discussion. Okay, member Mucci,
Thank you. If we approve this, when will the work start?
Manager?
Oh, Stephanie, do we have a date from them yet?
We don't have a start date yet. We just have a completion date of September 15th that we are pushing to get it done by. So as soon as we can get everything rolling and keep everything on task, then we can get it started pretty quickly. I'm hoping. It was estimated by the engineers to roughly take about a month, but who knows what happens when you open up the ground and see what's unfolding below.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions from the assembly? I have one follow-up to that. Is the work to be completed before the start of school?
No, unfortunately, and that was where we were at with the timeline, why I gave it at least until September 15th. School starts up at the last week of August. And that way it will give us a couple of weeks. We can bring the kids down to the aquatic center side and we'll work with the school on that, but we're pushing to get it done before school started, but we're going to fall a couple of weeks into the school year, unfortunately, but it's the best we can do.
Thank you. Other questions from the assembly? Would the clerk then please call the roll on resolution 2023-08?
Bob,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Jeff, Donna,
Yes.
Resolution 2023-08 has been approved unanimously by the assembly. With that, I'll move on to Petersburg Medical Center appeal of Planning Commission decision. On June 13th, 2023, the Planning Commission denied a preliminary plat for the Petersburg Medical Center subdivision and vacation of the right-of-way located within the proposed subdivision by vote of the commission. No public hearing was held on the subject by the commission. Petersburg Medical Center has filed an appeal of the Planning Commission's decision. Per Borough Code Section 18.36.040, within 30 days of the appeal filing, the Assembly must hold a public hearing on the appeal. Code also states that at the discretion of the Assembly, a full rehearing may be held with all parties presenting relevant evidence with opportunity to make argument, or the Assembly may elect to make its decision only on the evidentiary record, considering only the arguments of those opposing or supporting the appeal. Due to the lack of a public hearing prior to the Planning Commission's denial of the replat and vacation applications, it is advised the Assembly hold a full hearing on the subject. A public hearing and possibly a decision on the appeal could take place on July 17th at the regular Assembly meeting. If the Assembly chooses to postpone a decision on the appeal at the July 17th meeting, a special meeting should be scheduled to comply with Borough Code, which states the assembly shall render a decision on the appeal within 10 calendar days of the hearing by July 27th. With that, there is listed on here a suggested motion. If somebody would like to make that motion. Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I make a motion to approve a full hearing on the appeal filed by the Petersburg Medical Center regarding the Planning Commission's denial of a preliminary plat for the Petersburg Medical Center subdivision and vacation of the right-of-ways located within the proposed subdivision to be held at the next regular assembly meeting on July 17th, 2023 at 6:00 PM.
Is there a second?
I second that.
Okay, been moved by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Kensinger. Discussion. Member Mucci?
Thank you. Can somebody explain how this process will work on the 17th?
I had this, thank you. I had this question earlier today. Would the clerk like to expand on this?
Sure, I can give it a try anyway. So basically, at the beginning of the meeting on the 17th, we will probably go directly into a public hearing about this appeal and get that done and over with before continuing the meeting. At an appeal, if it's a full appeal hearing, everybody gets to have a say. So everybody will be able to stand up. At a true appeal, it's kind of like the medical center will give some information and then other people could come back and have their opinion on the same stuff, and it can go back and forth a little bit until the assembly is satisfied and that everybody has been heard. And then at that point, the assembly will decide if they want to go ahead and make a decision. I will have it on the agenda for you to make a decision that day. If you feel that you're not ready, you will just postpone that agenda item until a special meeting time is set within the 10 days that you have to render the decision.
Follow-up question?
Yes,
Member Mucci?
so this is the second part of this rezoning project. If we read the third reading at the next meeting of 2023-11, that'll be done. And then once we get past the plating decision, that's the second portion of this decision for the hospital.
Well, yeah, it was two separate things on
Yeah.
the planning commission's agenda. Yeah, but yes, so your decision will decide whether the plat can be redrawn and whether we're going to vacate the rights of way that are within that plat.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Other questions, Member Marsh?
Thank you. So essentially, the third reading does not override the appeal. The appeal will still happen if it passes on the third reading.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Member Kensinger?
I know I was confused about this, but zoning is a political decision, which is made by the assembly. Whether you take a property from residential to put it in the public use like this is. That's a political process, whereas plating's more of a formalized legal process that's different than zoning. Although it's confusing, they both have to go hand in hand for it to happen. So what we're doing on the plating is we're essentially taking off, if you look at a map, we're taking off all the lines on the map that says, you know, there's 35 lots here, this one's single family, this one's this one's that. There's roads that go through the property or right of ways that are also, once again, lines on the map. And so what we do when we replat something, we're essentially taking away all those lines and we're replatting it. I forget if I'm incorrect here, for the plat that the hospital wants, which is a couple big areas. And that's what the plating part of this is.
That's correct. Yes, thank you for that explanation. So the rezone, even if it's approved, doesn't necessarily mean it's an automatic replat.
Thank you. And if there's no more questions, I would ask the clerk to call the roll on the suggested motion.
Donna,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Jeff, Bob,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Thank you.
It's approved. The suggested motion was approved unanimously for a full hearing on the appeal filed by the Petersburg Medical Center regarding the Planning Commission's denial of a preliminary plat for the Petersburg Medical Center subdivision and vacation of the right-of-way located within the proposed subdivision to be held at the regular assembly meeting on July 17th. And with that, I'll move on. The manager would like to take a needed vacation, and we're in the process. Manager Griesbeck is proposing that to appoint Borough Clerk Thompson as acting borough manager in his absence. Do I have a motion to appoint Borough Clerk Thompson in the manager's absence?
So move.
Okay, second, been approved by our motion by member Mucci and second by member Scott here. With that, and if there's no comments, would the clerk please call the roll?
David?
Yes.
Donna?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Okay, with that.
Thank you.
There's communications from the last meeting are on the website and in the package. With that, I'll move on to assembly member discussion items under A, assembly member comments. Any members have comments? Member Kensinger.
Yes, I just want to thank everybody in the community that took the housing needs assessment survey. The survey is closed. We should have the results in a couple weeks of that, and the consultants working on finishing up their final part of the study. Hopefully I'll have a more detailed report at the next meeting.
Thank you. Is there any timeline to have their completed report?
They indicated sometime by the end of August. I think their contract goes out to the end of September.
Thank you. Any other members have comments? Okay, recognitions. Any members have recognitions? Member Mucci?
Thank you. I just wanted to thank the Parks and Rec Department for putting together their swim lessons for little kids, preschool kids, and I got a couple grandkids in it, and I think it's great that Parks and Rec puts this out there. I think we all spend a lot of time on the water, and I think when kids are comfortable in the water, I think it's a good thing for the community. And I just wanted to say thanks a lot for doing it. I appreciate it.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to move on. I need a motion to move into executive session if I can. Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that we adjourn into executive session to discuss with members of the borough negotiating team the status of the negotiations for a new labor agreement between the borough and the Petersburg Municipal Employees Association and the borough's proposals and position in those negotiations. And two, the status of and strategy for upcoming negotiations between the borough and IBEW for a new labor agreement.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. There was proposed by member Mucci and seconded by member Marsh to move into executive session. With that, we'll need to clear the room and who
We have to vote on.
oh, I'm sorry. We need to call a vote. Yes, I'm sorry. Would the clerk please call a roll?
Thomas?
Yes.
Donna?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we, who do you want to have present, manager?
It will be our negotiating team.